Welcome to M&A's webinar, Coaching for Resilient Ministry, Leadership. I'm Chris Vogel, Director of Next Gen Pastors and the Director of Ecosystem Development for M&A. Well, most pastors go into ministry to preach, disciple, and minister to people, and can be shocked by how much leadership and management are involved in the work. This has only been magnified 100-fold during COVID, with many leaving formal ministry as a result and no immediate end in sight. In this second webinar on resiliency in ministry, we consider leadership and management as a key element in a resilient ministry and the importance of adaptive leadership, function versus form in ministry, and how professional coaching can play a role in helping leaders. We have two special guests today. Reverend Vincent Tauriello, M&A coaching specialist. He's an ordained PCA minister and associate certified coach with the International Coaching Federation. He's been in pastoral ministry since the mid-90s in a variety of roles as senior, associate, and church planter. He now coaches leaders in ministry and music and business as the founder of By Design Coaching. Reverend Charles Hooper Jr. is also an ordained PCA minister and a master certified coach with the International Coaching Federation. He applies the principles and practices of coaching and discipleship and leadership in 3 PCA churches: Briarwood, In-Town Community, and Perimeter. He now coaches CEOs, business owners, and leaders in organizations like Chick-fil-A as the principal of Hooper Leadership Coaching, LLC. His motto is accelerating leaders through change with clarity. Charles's current assignment is doing business as ministry as a missionary in the marketplace. Well, we are so glad to be with you guys, and I will turn it over to you, and all enjoy.
Great. Thanks, Chris. And welcome, everybody. Hopefully, we're going to have a fun and encouraging time. As we were praying beforehand, we just asked that this would be a time of rest and encouragement. Perhaps some of our load could be lifted as we talk about some of these ideas. So before we get started, we're going to do a poll to let you weigh in on where you are as you think about the subject of resilient leadership and resilient management. And so as you see the poll coming up, feel free to answer that. So we've given you 4 choices. Go ahead and check one as you think about resilient leadership and management. What does that topic do to you, or what is your perspective on that topic? So go ahead and choose one of those, and then we'll see what the results here. All right. Thank you for answering those. And Chris will show us the results here once we've got it all finished. Also, while we're doing that, wanted to let you know that down at the bottom of the Zoom screen is a chat feature, and we're going to be using that in this webinar. All right, so let's see what it says here. So when we think about resilient leadership and management, 41% of you say it energizes you. 56% of you said makes me curious to develop some skills. All right, so that's our highest group. 3% said it intimidates me and I am stuck. And thankfully, 0% says it's only for business and not part of ministry. So, Vinny, that's good, as we were thinking through the 4 categories, that we've got a lot of curious people and perhaps some skills to develop. So we'll focus on that. Good job. Thanks, everybody.
Yeah, thank you. And I was happily surprised about the desire to develop skills.
Yeah.
And we'd like to be able to facilitate some of that today in the webinar. You know, as we think about leadership, a great quote that I've come across recently in a book called Resilient Ministry says this: leadership is the poetry of gathering others together to seek adaptive and constructive change, while management is the plumbing that provides order and consistency to organizations. In the ministry, pastors must handle aspects of each, even if they don't feel gifted to do so. Pastors must embrace these responsibilities as a vital part of their calling and beware the temptation to be the hero leader in the congregation. Leadership and management are more than just necessary evils. They are necessary components of discipling Christ's church.
Yeah, one of the things that I saw in that book that was really really resonated with me was a quotation from Samuel Blizzard. He was one of the earliest researchers of pastoral life, and he said that ministers allocate more of their energies to administering programs than would be anticipated in terms of training and their own expectations. And I've been on staff with 3 PCA churches, all above 1,400 members. So 2 of which would be considered mega churches, and 1 would be considered very large church. And in this most recent role, I some days I thought, I really should have gotten an MBA instead of an MDiv, because I feel like I'm just managing people who are managing programs. And it was more just program management, especially in a large church. At that time, we had 200 different ministries. And just the degree of complexity in leadership and management was really quite remarkable. So what we'd love to let you chime in on here using the chat feature. And why don't you go ahead and click on that chat feature, and then down at the bottom you'll see it's got a little blue button. If you'll click panelists and attendees, that way we can all see what you're writing here. So here's a question that we'd love, just a bullet point statement from you. So as you reflect on your success and struggles during COVID, what is your most important lesson you have learned about resiliency? So I'll go ahead and put that in the chat feature as you think about it, and go ahead and type your answer. And we'll make sure that goes to everybody. So there you go. I'll read it one more time. Feel free to type. So as you reflect on your success and struggles during COVID, what is your most important lesson you have learned about resiliency? All right. For the recording, I'll read some of these out as they come in. So it doesn't appear we can change. Oh, that's just to the panelists. Okay. So it doesn't look like we can all read it. So I'll have to read it to everyone. All right. Judith, thank you. To adapt to my circumstances. Arthur said, stay focused and consistent. All right. Not being too eager. All right. That'd be great if you could comment a little bit on what you mean by that. To practice grace. Yes. Something learned from Tim Keller. Put my own oxygen mask on first. Breathe. Take time to lament.
So important.
Thank you, Michael.
To have more of it.
Yeah, exactly. More resilient ministry. Pacing ourselves in Christ requires me to seek God more diligently, which has allowed me to see new pathways to ministry. Thanks, Jan. All right, my good friend Will. Change and disruption are great seed beds for faith. Press on and forward when it would seem others are shutting down. Yeah, Will, that's kind of interesting. We really have seen what leaders are made of during this time. Some are just so fatigued, worn out, playing the victim. Others are pivoting, learning, seeing this as a new challenge, being creative. So that's a good point there. Vinny, you want to read some of those others?
Yeah. Not trying to accomplish too much with all the extra time that we seem to have, and seem is in caps. Keep exploring possible variations on previous ministry experiences. It takes work, focus, and trust in others. Can't assume. Here's another. The time of COVID wasn't as hard as other years, just different. Resiliency allows us to see different difficulties and grow through them instead of being stopped by them. Yeah, I've definitely noticed that the leaders that I worked with, the changes were coming so quickly that the need to adapt, the need to, as you said, Charles, pivot, it just came at a faster pace. But rising up to that challenge rather than just sort of holding your breath and waiting for this to pass really made the difference. And led to some really creative results of what could be done differently to reach people and provide real effective connection and ministry in that time.
Yeah, that's so true. I have a couple of more things here. So Rick was saying, keep individual mentoring relationships active, even if you can't meet in the way you did before. Yeah, it's almost like COVID has made us forget that we have a thing called the telephone, which we've used for many years. It's like, oh yeah, I can still pick up the phone like we used to do.
I know. It's so
before
true.
We had Zoom. Yeah, Jason said, walk with God and lead out of that. Yeah, and Rick also said, persistence is needed, but not frenetic activity. Yeah. You know, it's interesting. I've heard more and more people talk about resiliency or adaptive leadership. And so I was curious, where did this come from? And so I discovered that, at least as far as we know, that Harvard business professors, Ronald Heifetz and Marty Linsky, they were kind of the originators of this idea of resiliency or adaptive leadership. And it's kind of funny what they've said about this. They summarized this as exercising leadership might be understood as disappointing people at a rate that they can absorb. And isn't that true? Just boy, as a leader, we're just going to disappoint people. We're just trying to figure out how to present it in a way that'll be the most palatable. I think one of the authors of Resilient Ministry went on to add this. He said, Jesus might have well also said, where two or three are gathered together, there are politics. And that is so true. If I didn't have an MBA, perhaps I needed a political science major to work in a large church.
Indeed. Yeah, that's really well said.
Yeah, so Vinny and I just wanted to reflect together on some of the impact and opportunities of this challenging season. Vinny and I met a couple years ago, and most every Friday we talk and we encourage each other and commiserate with each other and challenge each other. And we both coach each other sometimes, 30 minutes one way, 30 minutes another. And it really has been a source of sanity for me. We kind of joke that Fridays are our time to actually start the weekend once we have our Vinny and Charles time. One thing that I had shared with Vinny last week is one of my buddies recently decided to drop out of a D-Min program that he and I both are a part of because just burnout. And had a couple of elders resign from his church. His associate pastor of 8 years took another job because of the giving was starting to go down. And my friend just said, hey, I'm throwing everything overboard except just what's needed. So we've talked about this idea of being resilient, and it's eating his lunch. And so thankfully his session is giving him an extended sabbatical. and he's really trying to focus on just, really survival at this point.
Mhm.
And it just reminds me how this is such a stressful time for people. Of course, we know how stressful pastoral ministry is anyway, but especially during the pandemic. And so we're seeing leaders that are burning out, dropping out, even more extreme cases of suicide.
Mhm.
Whereas other leaders, for some reason, are able to really see this as an opportunity for change and for growth. And one of the things that I've really seen as I work with leaders is the idea that change is usually not resisted for the sake of just change, but it's the grief of loss that's the hardest part of change. And so being resilient in ministry means that we have to lead people through change and lead them through grief, because things will not be what they used to be. And of course, we all long for things to be pre-COVID, but we're going to see some changes that come up. So
That's such an important point that you make about grief, sort of
yeah,
grieving the loss of what once was, or even what you might have hoped could have been,
yes,
to birth something new,
yeah,
you know?
yeah. I've always heard people say they resist change, but as I think about change, either personally or professionally or organizationally, that component of grief really makes a lot of sense.
Yeah. Yeah. And I find that talking about it, that this is the end of a ministry, this is the end of a season to give way for that grief process, and
Yeah.
then to also give way for, okay, what's next? What can we now begin or start anew?
Yeah. Yeah. Those are key questions to ask. Yeah. A couple months ago, I read an interesting book that some of you may find interesting. It's called Canoeing the Mountains, Christian Leadership in Uncharted Territory. And so one of the guys at Fuller Seminary, Todd Bolsinger, he tells the story of Lewis and Clark and their adventures, and he's using that historical story that he intermit into the book with some of the principles of resilient ministry. And one thing that it made me think about is this concept of form and function. And so I'm coaching a pastor in California, and because of some of the restrictive policies that are happening there, they have really had to rethink the form of ministry. And so thankfully in Santa Barbara, their weather is very nice. So they're able to meet outside, but they're also trying to start small groups during this time, just so that smaller groups of people can meet together when they can't come together in the church. And so this pastor and I have been talking about the difference between form and function. So the function is leadership. The function is worship. The function is small groups or fellowship. But the form of meeting together in a large building once a week is no longer possible. So a lot of adaptive leadership has had to take place. So everybody's learning how to use Facebook Live for the first time, and everyone's realizing we still need to meet, we still need to communicate, we have to use Zoom, we have to figure out how to teach and train and do things with Zoom. And so one thing that was encouraging to this pastor is the function can continue. The function does not change, whereas the form does. And being able to communicate that to people has helped stabilize his congregation in the midst of a lot of change. But that book, Canoeing the Mountains, is one that you might enjoy.
That's good, Charles. Yeah, I've seen similar things in terms of the form versus function issue. There's the idea of still wanting to reach out to people who are not necessarily in that inner circle.
Yeah.
And I think that somewhat of the anonymity of being able to show up at things and like be a fly on the wall, whether it's a worship service or a small group, has helped some churches really open their hearts up, open opportunities up to people who wouldn't otherwise come. And,
Yeah.
They've seen a lot of opportunity grow from that as people
Yeah.
can overhear, become belongers before they become believers.
Yeah. 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 You saying that, Vinny, reminds me, our church does an evangelism training seminar, and there's probably on average maybe 150 to 200 people that will come to that. It's done maybe 2 times a year. So a couple of months ago, the church was trying to decide, should we cancel it or should we go ahead and do it, kind of similar to the way we've had to do worship. And so the team decided, no, let's go ahead and do it. And so they did it the same format, just over video. And I think the numbers were like 550 people participated in the evangelism training because it was online.
Mm.
And so it's like almost 3 times the number of people participated because of that new form. And yet the function of equipping the saints to do evangelism was maintained. So that was kind of a cool story.
Yeah. That is a cool story.
Yeah. Well, we've got a neat opportunity right now to kind of eavesdrop on a conversation that Vinny is going to have with Jason. And this is going to be a powerful and intentional conversation that is not a role play, and this hasn't been set up. And so Jason has agreed to be coached by Vinny. And one thing that we all know is, in the midst of being resilient, in the midst of much change, to have the thinking space with a processing partner who doesn't have a dog in the fight can be so helpful. And that's really what coaching is. So Vinny is a professionally trained coach, and we wanted you to have this opportunity to hear a real life coaching session between Vinny and Jason. So guys, take it away.
Jason, hi.
Hey, brother.
It's good to see you.
See you.
Yeah. Thanks again for courageously agreeing to be coached live here before a watching group.
It's a little different on Zoom. I don't see anyone, so it's better.
Okay, good. So how are you today?
Been good. It's a beautiful day. Springtime in Boston, so
Nice.
hope for that.
Yeah, good. So, Jason, we talked a little bit about, coaching today and the opportunity that you have, and to even consider what you'd like to be coached around. So what comes to mind?
Yeah, so the thing I wanted to kind of discuss is, I guess, for others to kind of have a little sense of this question. I work with Albanian immigrants, kind of in the diaspora around Boston, and it's a kind of a form of a network. So I lead a network of Albanian believers in local churches. I've been doing it for about 4 years. So, Vinny, as you know, I've had this team of 4 families that over the last kind of 2.5 years, I've been spending time weekly with them, mostly over Zoom, right? Because there's a geographic distance. But discipleship, kind of equipping and training and praying, but also part of that has been planning kind of the work of the network together. And in the spring, working on kind of transitioning them to some of that time that we've invested together for them to start putting that into the whole reality of them serving in their local capacity, whether with discipleship or small groups or in their local church. And so then also I can start investing that time in a new group of individuals and families for more discipleship. But I'm trying to think about how do I both, as I start enfolding others into this role of leadership within the network, how do I do that in a way that doesn't just push the older ones out, but in a broader way can, kind of gathers people together, but does give space for new people to take part again without kind of pushing older ones out.
Yeah. So you want to talk about ways to keep your current leaders engaged and feel valued, at the same time providing some space for some new leaders to be developed.
Yep.
Okay. And in relationship to your ministry, what is the importance of that new group and the old group working well together?
Yeah, I mean the old, the families who've already kind of been through this represent a lot of experience and wisdom, and have a lot to offer to some of these other families that would take part. But the new families represent really new locations, some new churches, some new kind of Albanian communities. So, and also new perspective, right? I think there's some new energy that would come in into planning and vision as some new people get involved as well.
Okay. So really it would be a win-win. The older group leaders have some wisdom to offer, and the newer, maybe younger group has some energy and fresh ideas to bring.
Yeah, definitely.
Okay. Yeah. So if we coached around this and you were happy at the end of it, what would you be wanting to walk away with?
I just think just processing some more of what this could look like, what dynamics I can kind of think about as I'm planning. I mean, I don't need immediate plans, but thinking about how do I start framing this and taking steps towards it, even in conversations with individuals or some of these groups.
Okay. So you're not really looking for a finished product today, just a chance to maybe frame it and what would be some next steps.
Yep.
Okay. Yeah, great. So where do you want to begin? Just kind of delving into this.
Yeah, I mean, I could, I guess share some of the dynamics that I'm considering. I think the clarity for me of bringing some of these new families in for the discipleship element is, I mean, that's kind of the priority, but also wanting to give them taste and input into the broader kind of planning. Looking to do that, but also considering how do I, for the families that have already been part, how does that have to start shaping or differently around, what does this look like? So just thinking about the communication involved, the vision cast for some of these things, and even just I'm thinking about what does this look like logistically for me in the midst of time and what's realistic.
Yeah. Okay. So with the communication piece, what has worked in the past for you?
Personal conversations as I'm with some of these different individuals or families has been, really helpful. So I've already been starting some discussions with the families about some of this transition. So we're starting to invest time into them thinking about what are their next steps for local ministry and for them using their gifts and abilities. So I think that's probably one of the main places where I can capitalize on, all right, how do I help them think about what the future even looks like in terms of their involvement?
Okay. So in some of these conversations you're already having with the existing leaders about their own involvement in the community and so on, to add this piece of, growing the ministry or involving others into it.
Yeah, I've kind of been starting that conversation, wanting to give it time, but just so they know that's kind of what I'm thinking. I think there is for sure the general reality of, as groups, we become really comfortable with those who are there, right?
Yeah.
And so pushing outward, especially bringing new leaders in, bringing new dynamics in, it just that's not always comfortable for us. The tendency is to kind of stay in that close group. So knowing I kind of needed to push against that in some ways.
Mm-hmm. Okay. And what would be needed on the other side in terms of communication with the newer group?
Yeah, so I have, I have people in mind, some individuals and some families who I think would be great, a great place for both the kind of discipleship aspect and, just they're considering their input into the wider network. So I think, it's starting to consider what conversations do I need to have with them?
Mm-hmm.
How do I start to think through what does this look like? What adjustments do I make from what I did in the past? Yeah.
Mm-hmm. So what would be a question or two you'd want to ask the new person?
Well, I think I probably want to ask them, are they interested in not just the interest in it, but the willingness to commit to a certain weekly kind of investment for them and potentially their family. But yeah, I think the commitment piece becomes important.
Yeah. Okay. Anything else?
I mean, I think there's the logistics of finding time to, to when does a group like that gather together, and how does that fit in even with the broader kind of leadership of the network? I mean, that's going to be a logistical thing that I'm going to have to figure out.
Mm-hmm. Are you thinking that more in terms of your own bandwidth or more theirs, or?
Yeah, I mean, it almost feels like I'll have three groups to logistically figure out, right? I'll have my own bandwidth, like what can I do? But I have the leaders who've already kind of gone through some of this, and then I have the newer leaders. And so having to figure out, okay, where do these three pieces kind of fit together, even logistically?
Yeah. So commitment, timing, I'm hearing also bandwidth, just broadly,
Yeah.
I also was picking up earlier, just not fear, but some concern about maybe the clash, of the two groups, or, will the older group, the older guard, make room for the newer guard, and what does that do in you as the leader?
Yeah. Yeah, I think it's an unknown. I think there's great potential for that on individual levels. How will the interaction work? Yeah, I think it is that part of leadership of the courageously walking into stuff that there's a lot that's unknown about how this is going to work.
Yeah. Yeah. So how are we doing so far? Just helping you to get your thoughts together about how to bring these two groups together, and in at least in the communication piece.
Yeah, it's good. I mean, this was helpful. It's getting me thinking about steps forward and the things that I can take one at a time.
Yeah. So I know something we've talked about in the past, just the idea of not needing to figure it all out yourself, but really kind of employing the others in determining the commitment, the timing, the bandwidth, and those kinds of things.
Yeah.
How does that help you in your, putting some of the framework around this?
Yeah, I think that's definitely relates to as I'm having these conversations with my group now, and helping them think about kind of where God's going to use them moving forward. I think it definitely is something for me to continue to set before them of, okay, what is our interaction as a network and with bringing new people in look like. So yeah, I think the logistics very much I can include them in figuring out how do we do this. And the more I include them, the better, probably.
Okay. So you feel like the more you include them along the way is better.
Yeah, it's that balance of having some clarity of, I think, the vision for it, but yeah, them being part of figuring out what does it actually look like. Yeah, I think that will definitely, the more buy-in from them and the more of that involved, I think the better.
Yeah, I could see that strengthening their commitment level, and also maybe being more open to the time commitment. What they what they value about it.
Yeah.
Yeah. So, what would be a step or two that you'd like to take to move forward on this?
Probably within the next couple of weeks, I'll continue to meet with my kind of core group, and so I think considering how do I start making this part of the conversation. As we often talk about, I think even my own just coming to as I pray and think and plan, coming to more clarity of the vision of this, and so I can set that before them, but also, yeah, setting it before them and starting to get their wheels turning on it.
Okay, so it sounds like making some kind of agenda item to begin the conversation with your team, and then also doing some of the behind the scenes praying and planning.
Yeah.
Are two next steps. Anything else?
With the praying and planning, I think being committed to doing that as I think of this next kind of group of incoming individuals and families. So just giving time and space for me to be prayerful and thoughtful about that.
Yeah. And you have those individuals already identified, or at least on your radar?
I have some. Yeah, I mean, I have some that I think, but there's clarity for me needed in terms of what exactly this is going to look like, and who kind of fits that probably.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah.
So how are we doing so far with this?
Good. That's what I need.
That's what you need. Okay, good. So if you had to say, what do you have in your pocket now that you didn't a few minutes ago that you're glad about?
I would say I think the just thinking about practical steps of what do I do in 2 weeks. I think that the reminder and encouragement of as early as I can, really giving my present group ownership in figuring this out, not just feel like I got to do it myself. So trusting that I set the agenda in a sense with it, but that even as God will work in them and together to kind of to lay that foundation for it.
Yeah. Excellent. Well, again, Jason, I want to thank you for your courage to just be sort of in a fishbowl today and be coached. So thanks again.
Pleasure.
Yeah.
All right. Well, thank you, Vinny, and thank you, Jason. Jason, hold on here. I'm going to ask you a question after we debrief and ask you what was most helpful that Vinny did. So I'm going to just make a couple of comments, and then feel free in the chat feature, everybody, you can respond to a couple of things here. But one of the things that you noticed is there's really 3 parts of this conversation that Vinny took Jason through. There was an agreement phase, there was an awareness phase, and then there was the action phase. So at the beginning, Vinny was connecting with Jason, just seeing how he's doing, coming into the short kind of laser coaching session that they had. And then he asked a series of a couple of questions to really get an agreement on what exactly Jason wanted to talk about and what he wanted to take away from the conversation. And so this is really a key part of any type of intentional conversation. So he asked a question about the focus. What do you want to talk about? He asked him what's important about that topic. And Jason was able to share some of the motives, some of the vision, some of the desires that he had for the ministry that he's associated with. And then Vinny asked him, what do you want to take away from our time? And so by the end, what result do you want to walk away with? And so it was very intentional so that Vinny and Jason could both get real clear on what that agreement was. And then basically Vinny said, kind of, where do we go from here? Where do you want to start? And so Jason gave a little bit of context, and Vinny was able to basically just follow the direction that Jason mentioned. You can tell that Vinny did not have memorized questions, or it wasn't wooden or artificial, but based on what Jason said, Vinny just followed that direction. I'll let you share some things as participants of some of the unique tools that you saw Vinny using. And then after he finished up with a little bit of awareness, he helped Jason transition into actions. So we checked on progress. How are we doing so far? Getting the result that you talked about. And Jason was able to let Vinny know that good progress is being made. And then Vinny helped him kind of funnel down the actions into a clear step to move forward. And that's so encouraging. What are one or two steps that you could take to move forward, to make progress? And research tells us that perhaps more motivating than finishing a goal is progress towards a goal. And so as Vinny and Jason continue to talk, every week or every other week, that progress that Jason sees is going to really help. So those were just a couple of observations that I wanted to share. So I wanted to ask you, and feel free to chat about this. What were some of the skills that you saw Vinny using to help Jason? Put that in the chat and let's see what we come up with. What were some of the coaching skills that you saw? Okay, great question asker. That's right. Many open questions that allowed Jason to explore. Thank you. Yeah, active listening. So he was not just understanding what Jason was saying, but he was active in the sense that he was helping Jason hear himself and helping Jason understand. Because a lot of times we just say things and we're not even sure what we've just said until that's reflected back. Good. What else did you notice that Vinny did that was helpful to Jason? So we've got great questions, active listening. There were a few others. Yeah, the agreement was really done well. The measure of success was established, which allowed them to focus on what was achieved toward the end. Thank you, Adele. Very good. Okay. Yeah, one thing that I really felt was effective is after Jason talked about brainstorming and coming up with a plan, Vinny reconfirmed that. He said it back to Jason, let Jason confirm, yes, in fact, that is the direction that we're going. So, okay. So, how might this conversation be unique from other types of conversations? What was unique to you? Put that in the chat feature and we'll see what some of you said. So one thing that I noticed is Vinny didn't do a lot of talking, which for pastors, that's hard. So he gave Jason plenty of space. What else did you notice that's unique about this conversation? Feel free to put it in the chat there. Okay. One of the things that's unique is, yeah, exactly, Jan. You beat me to it. Didn't impose his own agenda or action plan on Jason. And we're trained as ministry leaders, to say, "Thus saith the Lord." We're used to giving directives, and that's perfectly appropriate. Yeah, Dean, thank you. There was an assumed teachableness that Jason had. Yeah, and so, in coaching, we want to draw out of more than we want to put in. And so we're creating that space for that to happen. So Jason, as you reflect on this short laser coaching session, what was most helpful to you that Vinny did?
Yeah, I mean, the Vinny's questions always they always make me think, and they draw out, right, what's important to me and what I notice and what I'm actually thinking, and so yeah, his questions always kind of do that. Help me. What is important? What do I want to see happen, and help me think differently about something.
Yeah. Great. Well, thank you. And thanks again, Jason, for jumping in there in front of all these people and doing that.
My pleasure.
So Vinny, you and I were kind of brainstorming on some of the big benefits that we've seen from coaching with clients. What are some that especially stand out to you?
So just reflecting on my own experience as a leader, what I now can provide for leaders is stuff I wish I had.
Yeah.
And two that come right to mind is, one is a safe place to talk. So there's nobody's going to fire me
Yeah.
or shut me down or tell me I'm wrong or right, or it's more of a safe space to really talk, to think out loud.
Yeah.
And that's probably the other piece, is a thinking partner where, I can actually vet my ideas and plans far enough so that I could look at them, without pressure to make a decision or vote on them or something like that.
Yeah.
So I think those two things stand out for me.
Yeah, I would agree with that. I think two additional benefits that I've seen is, a lot of leaders and a lot of pastors are isolated. And even though we're around a lot of people, it's easy to be isolated. And people don't understand our role and don't understand the pressures that we have. Not to say that people in business don't have pressures, but we just have different pressures because our job is our church, is our friends, and our whole life is wrapped up in the life of the church. So I see coaching for me and those that I coach, it really combats isolation and loneliness, professional loneliness. I think another benefit is a coach is able to provide objectivity and honest feedback because the coach doesn't have a dog in the fight. There's no political agenda. And that's a nice space for a leader to be in. And just not having to politically maneuver and be so careful with what we say. And so the coaching environment can definitely do that.
Yeah, I agree that the objectivity is really critical and helpful. And the whole idea of loneliness, combating that, because leadership is lonely, and particularly in the ministry, because it's always there, even on vacations. I knew that cloud was coming back.
Yes.
To hover over me. So, yeah.
Yes, that's right.
Well said, Charles.
Yeah. David had another comment here. Vinny helped Jason to apply past lessons to this lesson. Kind of cumulative listening. Remember, we've talked about before your need to, and then let Jason apply it to this issue. Yeah, thanks, David, for that. Well, Vinny, I know one thing that you would love to offer to everyone here is a 30-minute call to explore some of the the challenges of leadership and some of the aspects of resilient ministry. And so you're actually going to give us a link to your Calendly so that folks could schedule that 30-minute call. And I guess if there's too many people, then perhaps I can help you. But so we wanted to offer that to you. So we just put in the chat box, if you wanted just to have a 30-minute conversation with Vinny. It's not a sales call. He's just going to kind of do with you what he did with Jason and see if a season of coaching would be helpful to you. So we wanted to make that available to you. Vinny, you want to mention about how to connect with you?
Yeah, thank you, Charles. That is one way to connect through the Calendly link. You can select a time, and there's no obligation. It's truly just to serve you for those 30 minutes and see if coaching is right for you at this time. And we also have a landing page that will be put. It's just in the chat now, where you could read a little bit more about what we do with the coaching ministry with M&A, and link there with me. And I'd also say this: if you want to speak with Charles, you can do that as well. So it's not a Vinny only. Charles is a wonderful, not just friend and brother, but he's also a wonderful coach. So don't be shy. Ask for what you want, and we'll do our best to provide that.
That's great. We have a big vision for the PCA and beyond. We'd love to see every pastor, every ministry leader have the opportunity. And we were talking before, we think one day a lot of seminaries are going to offer coaching courses in addition to counseling, because it's so needed. Mm-hmm. Well, as we wrap up here, we'd love to hear from some of you just in the chat feature. What was a highlight from our time today? Perhaps anything from the content that we shared about the topic, or something that was helpful to you about Vinny and Jason's coaching time. So feel free to put a highlight in there, and we'll read some of those as we're coming to a conclusion. Chris, you want to mention the upcoming webinar while people type, and then Vinny can close us out.
So, yeah, certainly. We'll be in April 7th on the same theme. Vinny will be, and you, Charles, will be talking about the same context of resiliency in ministry, in the context of spiritual formation. And the link for that is in your chat box as well. And then, coming up a bit more in the next week, this next Wednesday, we'll also have one session on with. I'm doing two things at one time here, so as I'm putting it in there, this link is for talking about church planter training, the upcoming opportunities that we have. And that's going to be talking with Ted Powers, the director of Midwest Alliance, some things that's happening here in the Midwest, but opportunities all around. And then on March 24th, Larry Hoop with By Faith is going to be talking about an article that's going to be published in By Faith. And that article talking about networks. PCA, there have been a number of networks, church planting networks going on, and I'm sending these right now. I'm seeing just to the panelists, so none of you are seeing them. I will get those to you in a bit, so sorry about that. So yeah, the one that's coming up right now for the attendees deals with that March 24th piece.
So as you're working on that, Chris, to send that out to everyone, I wanted to just point out that Brian wrote here that he had coaching as a pastoral intern, but it was within his local church. and that this experience reminded him of the value of coaching, specifically with someone outside my church now that I'm a pastor. Thank you. You're very welcome, Brian.
Yeah, and Jan said the opportunity to follow up with Vinny on a 30-minute call. Good job. Thanks, Jan. Okay. Feel free if you have a highlight just to share that. Well, Vinny, I think this was a helpful topic, I know, for me to think through again, just to be a resilient leader and think about the topic of leadership and in management moving forward. We definitely have a lot of great opportunities coming ahead as things open up and keep doing the function of ministry. And perhaps we've picked up some creative forms that might carry us onward. So thanks for leading our time in coaching.
Yeah. Well, I'll share a highlight, and that is that any opportunity I get to work with Charles is always a highlight. So it's fun to work alongside of you.
Yeah.
I'll get the last one up here for April 7th on the next one for spiritual formation. So very good. Well, thank you guys. Appreciate it. And look forward to other opportunities. We'll be able to talk about coaching, church planting, renewal, along a variety of other topics in the coming weeks. And if those of you are with us, feel free always to send any thoughts, suggestions you think would be great for an M&A conversation. So until the next time, please join us. We would love to be with you. Bye.